In the legal world, there is a combination of forces that feed a corrupt and suffocating legal system for attorneys. Law schools, law professionals, judges, and even the firms themselves for whom you work create a system, a matrix, if you will, that is nothing like what you thought when you passed the bar exam. The purpose of this podcast is to help you escape this legal matrix, leading you out of the proverbial desert to be free of the bondage of the matrix. Hosted by Bryce D. Nyer, attorney at law with over 30 years experience in the trenches of civil and criminal litigation at the state, federal, and international levels. He's a highly accomplished and resourceful legal professional, a true master of his craft, and he's here to help you get your life back. Here's your host, Bryce D. Nyer.
All right. This is Bryce D. Nyer coming at you live from Fayetteville, North Carolina, home of Fort Bragg, for another episode of Escape the Legal Matrix. And tonight, guess what we're going to talk about? We're going to talk about something historical, something that's relevant to the world that's going on today and has been going on since the creation of man. We're going to talk about judgment. We're going to talk about a very interesting period of time in human history, one of which I'm very knowledgeable. We're going to go back in time. We're going to go back in time almost 100 years. We're going to talk about the name Roland Freisler. Roland Freisler. Yeah, I bet a lot of you don't know who that is. So let's get into it right now. So here is the deal. You go into the legal system, into this legal matrix, expecting due process, expecting judgment, expecting that things are going to be fair. Well, I got news for you folks, you law students, you new lawyers, and people out there. The legal matrix is not fair. To me, it is organized crime. It is a walking RICO violation. Now, you might say, gosh, Bryce, you don't sound too happy with the legal system, the justice system, legal profession. No, I'm not. That's why I'm doing Escape the Legal Matrix. Because you law students, you young lawyers, you have to understand and know the truth about what you're getting into, what you're dealing with. It is a chaotic world today. It is a world where true justice and truth is rare. So I'm going to take you back. So get ready, get strapped in, buckle up. We're going back to 1933 into Nazi Germany. Get ready, because here we go. All right, here's the deal. So in 1933, Adolf Hitler comes to power. He becomes the chancellor, and then President von Hindenburg dies, and he consolidates his power and names himself the Fuhrer, asserts absolute control, and murders his political rivals. 1933 is the year of the first concentration camp being established. That's at Dachau. Now, with all of this rise of socialism in Nazi Germany, they revamp everything. Economics, families, schools, you name it. The country under the Nazi Party is undergoing a complete and utter transformation, the likes that nobody has ever seen before. And part of that deals with revamping the legal system there. Because in reality, during this period of when Hitler comes to power, his 1,000-year Reich that only lasts 12 years from 1933 until May of 1945, he institutes and put in place people who basically infect the legal system of Germany. And in reality, there is no due process. And there is this man who is ultimately one of the most evil men of the Nazi Party by the name of Karl Roland Freisler, who was a German jurist, judge, and a politician. And he had served as the state secretary of the Reich Ministry of Justice, basically from 1935 to 1942. And then from 1942 to 45, he was basically the president of what they call the People's Court. Now, this is important to understand, because what was happening is anytime anybody challenged the state, the regime, they were brought before people like Freisler and the People's Court. And many of them were sent away to concentration camps or they were executed. There was no due process. And why should this concern you? Because this is happening in the world today, not just in other countries, but in our own country, the United States of America. And in July of 1944, there was a plot to kill Adolf Hitler at the Wolf's Lair, which was his East Prussian headquarters. And on that day, on July 20th, 1944, Hitler was at a meeting, and Colonel von Stauffenberg and others conspired and planned to kill him and set off a bomb, but it did not kill him. Now, why is this important? Because what resulted out of this, because Hitler survived this assassination attempt, is that many men and women were rounded up, and they were ultimately brought before Roland Freisler, the head of the People's Court. And they filmed this with sound and, of course, video of the trials. And they would bring the defendants in, and he would just ridicule them and scream at them and yell at them and just humiliate them. They were generals and prominent people in Nazi Germany that realized what an insane person Adolf Hitler was, and that their country, it was doomed. And you can watch and you can Google the videos and listen to Freisler and his insane screeching and screaming. And there was no due process. You were already guilty when you walked in there. And what he did is he sentenced many of them to death, either by guillotine or, for the ones involved in the July 1944 plot to kill Hitler, he had them hanged with piano wire. And they filmed it. And Hitler would watch it, and they would show it to SS officer recruits. And they became so horrified, they stopped showing it to the SS officer recruits. But anyway, the point I'm making here is that the legal system, the justice system that is supposed to serve the ordinary citizen, can become infected with a plague of delusion, of deception, of lust for power, of lack of due process. It can take your property. It can take your kids. It can take your life. And you young folks out there, you need to wake the hell up, and you need to understand what is happening in your world today. And you young law students and you young lawyers, you need to be vigilant. You need to be soldiers, legal warriors. And you know what? You're not doing that. You are living in a life of deception and delusion and comfort and thinking it's okay, and you don't want to make waves. And yet what you do is you allow people to come to power, and you become part of the legal matrix because you're scared and you don't have the guts to stand up and do what you need to do. And when you fail to stand up, when you fail to say something, you, in a sense, are a co-conspirator with people like Roland Freisler from 1933 to 1945. You have associated and co-conspired with those that will undermine justice and truth and fairness. Because then the Lady Justice, she isn't blind. She's infected with the same delusion and deception. There's no blind justice. There's just tyrants, judicial tyrants. This is a big fear of mine in this country today. The judiciary has been hijacked. It has been infected with the cancer of activism, taking people's monies, their lives, being used as this weapon of vindictive litigation against American citizens, against politicians, those that would dare stand up for truth. And in a sense, the world has become far worse than Hitler's Third Reich. You go to some countries out there in the Middle East, there's no due process. They stone people, they hang people, they throw people off buildings. They're lust for blood and a lust for power. They use the legal system as a sham. Your guilt is determined before you walk in the room. And this is what happened in Nazi Germany. This is what is happening in the world today, right now. You're seeing so much Orwellian control in the EU, the UK, even here in the United States of America. And the judicial system is the primary weapon being used with what I call the Freisler Effect. Yeah, the Freisler Effect. And everybody doesn't care about it, or a lot of people don't care about it until it happens to them. Then all of a sudden they care. Everybody was like, COVID, wear the mask, don't ask any questions. Ooh, well, we know what happened now. It was all a sham. All of it. It was a big sham, big control. Big Orwellian power grab. People died. People got sick. People got behind academically, socializing with people. It was horrible. And judgments were passed on social media, on TV, about people who wouldn't take the shot. They were crucified. They were persecuted. They lost their jobs, their livelihoods, and a lot of them lost their lives. And this is what happens when the legal matrix runs amok. The Freisler effect comes in. No due process, no justice, no truth. It's the state coming in and saying, if you dare rise up and try and be truthful, we will gut you and cut you down. Now, this is a harsh reality and people don't want to hear it, but you need to hear it because everything you do from your birth until your death is somehow controlled and managed and just packaged by this thing we call the legal matrix. Everything. And you dare step out of line, you dare stand up for truth, and you're a marked person. I see this happening all over the world today. People standing up for what's right, only to be shot down, to be persecuted. And yet people, they still get up and they're still going to fight the good fight. And you got to ask yourself, are you fighting the good fight? Am I fighting the good fight? Or are we just going along to get along? Because if you read history, real history, not the crap they're rewriting and trying to make stuff up, the real history, especially about this time in Nazi Germany, it is the textbook course on where a legal system can run amok. The same thing happened in the Soviet Union. When Lenin came to power in 1917, and then he died a few years later, and Stalin took over. Stalin basically killed 20 million of his own people. 20 million. There was no due process in the Soviet Union. There was no due process in Nazi Germany. There was no due process, and there still isn't in North Korea. There's no due process in many of the Middle Eastern countries. It just doesn't exist. You all take your freedoms for granted so often that you have no idea. All of you out there protesting against our U.S. Constitution and the laws and truth and stuff, and say, and march and block roads and all this other crap that you do, why don't you go to some of these other countries and feel the Freisler effect? You go to some of the countries and you stand up and you say some of the things you're saying in your delusion and deception, they're going to kill you. They're going to kill you. The judicial branch was always meant to be the last reservoir of integrity, to be there, to safeguard freedoms, constitutional rights in the United States, to stop tyranny. And now they've become the tyrants. It's true. A lot of state and federal judges are absolute tyrants. There are some really good judges in this country trying to do the right thing, to be fair and to be just, but they're getting mowed over. The political winds, the lawfare, threatening their livelihoods, their retirements. The Orwellians are on the march. The Freislers are in place. Only truth is going to defeat the delusion and deception and the lies. How many millions died in World War II? How many millions died during Mao's rise in communist China? How many died from Pol Pot and in Cambodia and Laos and countries like that? Freislers are everywhere. Now, what's ironic about Freisler is he was just so full of lust for blood that I think it was February 1945, during a bombing raid in Berlin, he was holding court. Another one of his insane trials, and probably going about to sentence some more people to death, and he got bombed. And guess what? He got killed in the bombing, clutching to his lust for power. Even though clearly he should have known, or knew, they all knew that the war was not going in their favor. By February 1945, the Soviets were continuing to advance from the east. The Allies were advancing from the west. They didn't have resources. They were still killing people in the concentration camps. They're just insanity. And there's Freisler holding court. They're being bombed. And 3 months later, Germany would fall in total destruction. millions killed, lives ruined, just the whole country in shambles. And this is what happens when delusion and deception and lies enter the picture, enter the hearts and the minds of men and women that do nothing, that say nothing, out of fear, being cowards. Because it allows the Freislers of the world to rise to power. And the judicial system is a dangerous weapon when it's in the hands of despots, of tyrants, of those who have a bloodlust for power and coercion. Don't shy away from it. Don't duck your head in the sand. Wake up. Wake up. Your world is burning to the ground. There are people that are trying to do the right thing and save people, to save their nations, to save their sanity. But if you law students, if you lawyers do not get off the bench, if you don't go get in the arena and go fight the insanity, the delusion and the deception and the lies, then the Freislers will sit upon the bench of judgment, and not just of others, but of you too. This is Bryce Denier. It's been another episode of Escape the Legal Matrix, coming live from Fayetteville, North Carolina, home of Fort Bragg, where every day men and women don the uniform and wage war against our enemies that would seek to take the very freedoms away from us that we so often take for granted. This is Bryce out.